Welcome to Secrets from the Saddle podcast. I'm Sylvie, your host, fellow cyclist, bike club founder, cycling coach, bike race junkie, just truly super passionate about cycling. My journey with cycling started 20 years ago when I opened a spin studio, started a women's race team, and founded a women's only cycling club called Cycle Fit Chicks. I'm super thrilled to reveal all aspects that make the world of cycling operate. I'm so excited to be able to bring you interesting people from around the world, pro cyclists, recreational cyclists, coaches, event organizers, bike shop owners, everything and everyone you need to know or ever wondered about when it comes to cycling. I know you'll enjoy this episode. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Secrets from the Saddle, All Things Cycling Podcast. Now, today we have on Karl Vorndran. He is in, he's in Ohio. No, Pennsylvania. No, God. Anyways, so my friend Karl, he's my friend. He trained with me last winter on during my indoor winter cycling program. It was 20 weeks. We started in November and to the end of March. And he was the only guy in the program. Kudos to Karl, and super confident in himself. He was with like 12 other women. And his goal was to race at Coast2Coast, Michigan's race. So he just completed that 2 weeks ago. I said, hey, Karl, I need you on the podcast to talk about your experience. It would be great because I have my Unbound experience, and this was his first 200-miler. And I was following him. It was a tracking system. It was super cool because mine was a tracking system as well. And it's just like he trained all winter with us for this event. And that's again why I want to have him on here. And I don't just interview pros, and I love the stories from just regular cyclists like you and me who go out and try epic shit, right? And we have a story to tell because there's so many of us who are getting into the realm of going out and trying different things that it's just great to hear our stories, whether they're struggles, whether they're achievements, whether they're successes, failures. I mean, everything is a learning curve. And that's why I wanted to get Karl in here to share his story. And I hope he can get on. There's a huge storm just passing overhead right now at my place. And I hope it's not going to affect this podcast. We hope we don't lose internet. But yeah, I'm super stoked to have Karl on. And I hope our time change hasn't screwed things up as well, because I believe he's an hour behind us. But yeah, so here he is. As I was saying, I am super stoked to have you on the podcast, not only because we trained together and I coached you during the winter, but you had I just want to talk to more people who have had experiences like yours. You did Coast2Coast, Michigan's Coast2Coast from its so they bussed you over to Erie and you biked over to Michigan.
Well, so what happened is there was a group of 5 of us we got the work van, and we had 2 vehicles that run support. So we went up. So we actually drove up and got an Airbnb just south of the starting line. And then they had the support crew that followed us. That was our own support crew. And it worked out amazingly. And I wouldn't have been able to finish if it wasn't for that. It was very,
all right. Good. So we're going to get right into that because this was Karl's goal throughout the winter. This was his big event that he I was training for, and I took some advice from him, like getting my waxing my chain. He's like, "This, you got to start waxing your chain. This is what I do," and I was thought it was really cool because I hadn't started thinking about that, and that saved me on my race. But Karl, I want you to give us a little bit of background on how you got into cycling, and and then just all your training process, because we're going to talk about your experience, obviously, because there are some great pictures and there are some yes, not so great pictures, and we all know at that
Oh yeah.
that time is like what that means. But like, yeah, give us a little bit of background,
So
how
I'll
you got
start
into
out
cycling.
with a
Yeah.
little bit how I got into cycling was actually due to my dad. He loved cycling, and it was a thing that I just grew up with. Nothing very serious, but we just loved going. There's a rail trail here called the towpath that goes about 40 miles north of where I am in Akron, Ohio, to Cleveland, and we would ride that and back for as little as I when I was, starting at like 5 or 6. So
Ah.
we would go out and do 10, 20 miles on the towpath trail growing up. Fast forward to college. I went to Kent State University, and I was just off a campus, and I'd build up a bicycle. I had a lot of friends who were getting into biking at the time, and I'd, build up a single speed that I used to cruise across campus. And then as I was getting ready to finish my uh, bachelor's in performance art at Kent State University in 2009, I came up with the idea that, well, when I am done with college, I'm going to move to a different city, because having a degree in art in Akron, Ohio in 2009 was there's not many opportunities. I'd already worked at the art museum, and that was basically it. So I
Uh-huh.
was like, oh, I want to move to city. I'd visited San Francisco, really liked it. I was vegan at the time, and it was also like they had entire vegetarian grocery stores. And I had convinced one other friend of mine who was working at a gas station overnight shift to, like, hey, let's bike across the country. Let's do the adventure cycling route and go from Akron, Ohio, 3,700 miles to San Francisco, and then live there, because I, didn't have student loans kicking in for payment, not for 6 months. So I was kind of, well, all right, well, this is the time I can do it. We took
Yeah,
two
right.
months. We rode, 60 days to San Francisco. I lived there for a year. My friend Todd, he still lives there, just had a baby, and has lived there ever since. And so that was what really got me into, it was my only mode of transportation. And then when I moved back in 2010, when my father passed away, I still kept biking, and, would do tours here and there. Like I did the Gap Trail to Washington, D.C., did down the Bourbon Trail in Kentucky, and would do, these 2-week long events. Fast forward to 2020, I had my first son. And then the time to do longer events went away, still cycled a ton. But I'm really good at going long distances. Like that's the thing, is that we do 120-mile days. The longest
Yeah.
day we did on the tour was 180 miles in a single day. So like I liked going low and slow, the classic, tortoise, like I can go forever, but 18 hours in, I still got punch at the end. And I was like, saw these gravel events that a lot of my friends were doing, and I was like, wow, I could transfer this over. And some friends had talked about doing it in 2019 before the
Oh
pandemic, and then
yeah.
it kind of fizzled out. And then I really just started, last summer, was like, I'm going to do it next year. I had a few other friends that I'd could, talk to, and I had one person who was actually my high school art teacher, who we'd reconvened and go to the same bike shop, and we're biking together. And he was already done a 200-mile ride, and I'm like, hey, you should do this. And then I had another friend, Tony. Then he had another friend, and then we had, and back in November, it was like October, November of 2022, we kind of feel like, all right, we got this idea, let's do it. And I'm very much a campaigner, like, come on, you got this. Like,
Yeah,
oh, it's
yeah,
200 miles, it's no big deal. I mean, and we had a few friends who'd done it previously, and they were like, yeah, it's just really long. The terrain's not too bad, but it's just long, so and I was like, yeah, see, it's fine. We have several people. I knew 3 people that did it, back in like 2018, I think 2018 or 2019. So that was kind of what had started this ragtag group of 6 of us to head up to Michigan and attempt to cross the entire state in less than 21 hours.
Yeah, and you did just under 20 hours. And you know, it was so cool is because I got to follow you on the tracker because I was being tracked on Unbound. And I didn't get to see it, obviously. But it was really cool to watch you like seriously move along the tracker, like move. I was like, wow, that is really cool and real time. So all right, so you got six of your buddies. All right, so you found me last year. How? And that was kind of where you started the process in your prop in like training.
Yeah, I had well, I was just looking for any podcasts about the Michigan race, and I'd found the podcast you did with the people who run the race.
Yeah.
And I was like, perfect. And then I started following, and then I was like, well, I don't even know where to begin for training like an event like this. So that's where it kind of all led me to it. I listened to a bunch of episodes and was like, all right, let's do this. So and then signed up in October, and then the rest is history.
Oh, I see. There's your son. Is that your
Oh,
son?
yep, that's my son.
Hey,
Hey, Milo. That's my 3 year
hey.
old.
I was wondering who's making that little noise in the background.
Yeah. Hey, Milo.
Cool.
Go with Mama.
Are you off for like
Yeah, we're up for the holiday.
yeah, yeah.
So. All
I
right.
know there's lots of stuff to play with. If you guys are watching the podcast, like Karl is seriously into music, as you said, is he did the art degree, but he works in the industry and I got to meet him on my way back from Unbound and go out for lunch and take a tour of the office space and the company that he works for that makes their their pedals for
Guitar and effect, yeah, guitar effects
guitars.
pedals like distortion, delay devices that just about every band uses. Anywhere from uh, just everyone from Weezer to Nine Inch Nails, Linkin Park, Paramore, everyone, the guitarist for Beyonce, like it just, the roster of our artists. I've been there for 10 years. I started out building them, but then I've been sales manager for the last 10 years. So
Yeah, and it's pretty impressive and cool when you see like the whole assembly line. But anyways, so I digress. But okay, so Karl found me and I had just started putting my program online for training. And it was a new program that I had set up where we train 3 times a week. And we started at 4 hours and then we moved to six. But that is where we all started like sharing our stories. And how did you enjoy it? Like, just have to ask you. And then we're going to get into the coast to coast, like getting you all set up and stuff. But
I mean,
I
the
just
thing
have to
is,
ask.
I love training, and the thing is, I had tried doing trainer stuff before, and I just didn't like it. Zwift was new, so I got that all set up, and was kind of like, all right, I bought all the stuff, I'm in, but I wanted to make the best of it, and it gave me, a regular. Every week or every, the 3 days a week, I was able to look forward to it, come home, get ready, and I felt great. I mean, I just really enjoyed it. And then the other people training in it were awesome. We do our group rides. I love the mix up of it, and then also just the gains. Like I started out, I was very much a touring cyclist. I would go low and slow, just ride forever, but didn't do anything about form, didn't work on pedal stroke, didn't work on out of the saddle, which is my biggest thing. Is I couldn't even do 15 seconds out of the saddle. And by the last session, I think we did 12 minutes without sitting down. And like, I just was able to absolutely, just see the improvement. And then also as we did the FTP tests and, and watch it go, my FTP go from like, 180 up to like 260. And it was just a really just great to see, like, wow, just really put in the work. But again, we were, doing 6 hours a week. And then
Hmm.
every month we would do the 100K. And at one point I did a 100-miler,
Yeah.
I knew I was like, I got 200 miles coming up. I just need to get time on the saddle and get time with the pedal stroke and really work on that. And it paid off and huge. I was able to finish. It was a tough
Oh my
race.
God. It was really cool and you mentioned that. I'm like, oh my God. But the thing is that one day I like say, hey Karl, you look kind of like you've lost weight. I just remember you saying that. You're like, yeah, I've lost like 30 pounds. I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
what?
I was at about 280 when I'd started the program. And then I'd also been doing strength training 3 days a week at
Mm.
the gym and working with a nutritionist because I was like, I got to get all this stuff dialed in. But from October to April, it was down to about 250, which still put me in the Clydesdale class for they had the large people's category, which is awesome. So
But anyways, it's a big hit with the strength, and I mean, you're a tall guy too, so I
six
mean,
foot 2 inches. So I'm
yeah, so it's like evenly distributed. Like when I saw you, I'm like, well, whatever. Like, but okay, so let's get into your preparation, a little bit of your preparation, but I want to talk like the race,
yeah.
because and how you like, yeah, so let's start with the preparation, because I know that you were like doing stuff like I mentioned the waxing the chain. I'm like, oh god, if Carl's doing that, I think I might. And you do these like wax chain parties, which I'm
Yeah.
totally intrigued about. Share that,
Yeah.
because I'm like, I
So
think I need to do that with some girls.
it's amazing because it's a whole process, and it's really not that bad once you do it, but it can
Yeah.
be intimidating, and then it does take a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
And we use the Instapot method where we heat up. I use the Silka super secret wax, heat it up in the
Yeah.
Instapot, and then we would dip our chains and hang out and let it 20 minutes and really marinate. And it started at first, it was our first time. It wasn't pretty. We pulled it a little bit late, so there was a lot of excess wax, but we got really good at doing it. And then just like having a few beers, chatting about, hey, how are we going to do this? We had my work allowed us to take the big Sprinter van, which were able to fit all the bikes and all the people, and you could stand up in it, and it was amazing.
Ooh.
And we had our friend Albert, who was originally going to do the ride, but he wasn't able to train this summer, and he runs a business around here called Akron Coffee Roasters, and so he bailed, but he was running the second support, which so there's 5 of us who are riding and ended up working really nice. We decided one of the tips from the people who we knew had done it before was like get Airbnb the day after and the night before.
Mm.
It's like you can stay in a church or campground, but it's like having nice beds and like being able to have like somewhat privacy getting up, even though we got up at 4 a.m. to get to the starting line at 6 a.m. But it was really nice to have really nice sleep. And then, we'd also had planned so that we'd all share our nutrition as well, like had different strategies for that. Again, the wax chain was a big one. A lot of us, it was the first time waxing the chains.
Yeah.
On my local bike shop, Dirty River Bicycle Works here in Akron, the one mechanic Yonda, he's been preaching the wax chain forever, but no one listened. And
I
finally,
know, right?
you're like, finally, your wax chain. I've been trying to tell you for ages that and it's especially the biggest thing is it really is great in dirt and sand is it really just flecks off all the
Mm.
stuff where, if you're using oil-based lube, it'll really mar up your drivetrain and really just attract the dirt. And my chain was awesome by the end of the race. I just took a little dry rag on it. I was like, wow, it's really not that bad, considering we just rode through 200 miles and half of it being sand. So it really has been, especially for off-road. And then also it's just, I know it's kind of superficial, but the fact that you touch your chain and it doesn't get
Get
grease
you
all over
dirty.
it's amazing.
Oh, and it looks silver all the
Yeah,
time. Like
it looks
that's what
super
every time
good.
I look down, I'm like, dang. It's
Yeah.
like because I did my road and my gravel bike, so I was like, yeah, you're right. It is a really nice thing, actually.
And it also like, basically you got, every 100 to 300 miles doing a drip wax or top up, and then hot waxing every 1,000 is what I'm
Mm.
doing. And one of the other guys, he rides a ton. 10,000 miles a year, just absolutely rides a ton. And he'd put in 1,000 miles before the race on the wax chains and had already moved them out, and was just saying that normally he's going through cassettes and drivetrain stuff, and everything was still perfect. He had a newer Otso bike, and he was just like, he was getting so many more miles on his drivetrain, so it was saving him money by not having to replace all the parts, cassettes specifically. So
Okay, so what have you learned with regards to waxing your chain? Like, what's best practice? Like now
I,
that you've started it,
yeah,
because now this
I
is
will
where
say that
I'm
I'm
at.
still no expert in it, but I've gotten pretty good that, like, getting using the Instapot to keep really good temperature, and then I drop it in, and I use a bent spoke to hold the chain.
Right?
Just
Yeah.
kind of go it in, and then you shake it around, get all the air bubbles out, and then I let it sit in the hot wax for 20 minutes, and then I turn it off and pull it. this is where the things, if you pull it too late, you'll get too much excess wax. There's some, some people say pull it while it's still really hot. Some people say you want to get it closer to cool down. I've been doing it kind of in between, where turn it off, still pull it pretty hot, but it's really easy to install. I mean, the biggest downside on the waxing, or the kind of first process, is you really want to start with the new chain, and you really want to strip all of the factory grease and cosmoline off it. And there's
Yeah.
some kind of nasty chemicals that can be used. I know Silka just came out with a product last month that is one step to strip a chain, and apparently works really well. It's sold out, so I haven't been able to try it, but I used the
course.
mineral spirits and acetone, for now, or you shake it in a ball jar, and it's not that bad. Again, it's kind of nasty stuff, but considering we don't have to, you only do that at the very beginning, and then when you hot wax, you can either dip it right back in the hot wax, or you can use hot water to reset it if it's been a while. Like I'll do, like what I did after my race is I reset, like took a kettle, boiling water in a bowl, got all that, sprayed it off, got all the old wax off, and then just freshly dipped it,
Right, because I bought one of those ultrasonic
clean. Yeah.
little cleaners to shake it all off. Because I do, when we did it at my buddy, well, at my friend's buddy's place, she's like, "I'm gonna bring you to my friend's place, and we're gonna take care of you." And I'm like, "Okay," and but I noticed it, like, what a difference. I mean, how dirty the water is, and to, like, you can shake your chain, and you
You
can
can
hear
hear it
the
rattle, you can hear
yeah
the metal rattling, and that's how you know that you've got it good. Is it has this weird kind of shimmer to it, that
yeah
like metal on metal shimmer, and that's how you know, okay, well, cool, we're ready to wax it and
to
get it,
dip, yeah, to
going.
dip it. It's
So,
totally clean. So cool. All right, because that's where I'm at now. Because, like, I cleaned it, and I just put a little bit of wax, because I didn't have my my not my, I didn't buy an Instapot, but I got one of those fondue
yep.
little thingies.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I sent one to Value Village, and I'm like, or like Salvation Army, and I'm like, damn, like 2 weeks before,
Yeah.
like, fuck, and I had to go back and buy it.
Another, yeah. That's how it always goes.
But okay, so let's start talking about the event, and just how you felt going in, and some of the things that you experienced for that, because I hear from that course, like, you could, it's such a varying in terrain,
Yeah.
from one side to the other.
I know it goes through 11 ecological zones.
Wow.
It's the most diverse race in the U.S. for, just really amazing. And then it's just, Michigan's very beautiful, so just to give a little setup, we drove up the day before. Well, all of us had done a bunch of training. I did a bunch of longer rides. I did like a double metric, a 200K. And then I did another, 100-miler. And then I was feeling really good. I did like a 30-mile night ride 3 days before, as I kind of read, like, okay, that was it, kind of get it, and then just started eating, getting ready. So we had lots of stuff, and then made big batch of pasta and beans that we were all eating and having a good time. I had a little bit of mezcal just to set the tone, as Albert from Akron Coffee Roasters made sure we had plenty of supply of everything.
Yeah.
So, and we get into this. It was like this Saginaw Bay fish camp. So it's like there's 6 bunk beds, and it was a really nice area. It was about 30 minutes south of the starting line. So we knew we had to get up. We got up at 4 a.m. Our goal was to be out by 4:30. We did that, so we had loaded the bikes into the van. Like, it was a nice big Sprinter van. We could fit all the bikes in there,
Sweet.
just load them in. It was nice. We had all of our stuff that we were carrying in the van. Like, we had full work stands and truing stands in case things were going, there were 5 of us riding. So we had everything, it's like, we got a big Sprinter van. No reason to hold back. We're pretty light on what I was carrying on the bike itself, knowing that there'd be 3 checkpoints where we could see the van, mile 54, mile 103, and then mile 169. So we had a bunch of nutrition. I had like 12,000 calories or something like that, that I had, that I put like a portion, like a third of it in, and then kept the rest in the van and would re-up. So we wake up 4:30 in the morning. We're out. We go get to the starting line. It's this beautiful campground, Eau Grace campsite marina. There's a little lighthouse. Everyone's dipping their back tire into Lake Huron. And but then this was a very challenging day. Then things start going a little off the rails a bit. So my good friend Nicole, who wasn't just had like a change in job stuff where she was brought back to the office after 3 years of working from home and didn't know they were coming back in, so wasn't able to train enough, knew that she wasn't going to be able to finish, but was going to ride at least to checkpoint 1 or 2, and and then help provide support. But about 10 minutes before the start, at about 5:50, her front tire is completely flat. And so I go, and I used to work at a bike shop and fix flat tires on the weekends, and we had a rental fleet. So I just go in, we change it, couldn't figure it out, pop in a tube. She was running tubeless, but then we had to pop in a tube because they pumped it up and it was still down, lost 20 pounds in like 15 minutes or something. Wow. So we get it fixed, and then they start, and then I'm like, oh, I gotta go. And then I realized that I didn't get my tire levers put back in, that someone had grabbed them and while helping me change the tire, and then had put them in the van. So I run to the van. So then I start rolling out dead last from because it was just because I'm not gonna start 200-mile ride with no tire levers. Like I've been on that before, and at this point I mentioned I was riding the Lauf Siegler. It was fully rigid. I know most people will be like, why didn't you get the front forks? I'm technically over the weight limit. I know it'd probably be okay, but I just didn't want to chance it. But I really got that because I could run really wide tires. One of the advice that I was given to me was like, with the sand, you're like, hey, look, the hills are not too bad, but the sand, you'll run as wide a tire as you can get. So I ran 29 by 2.25 Vittoria Terreno cross country mountain bike tires that were semi slicks, that were basically slick in the middle, had a little bit of tread on the sides, and they were incredible. Again, thanks to Dirty River for recommending those tires. They were absolutely lifesavers in the sand. So but I was like, all right, gotta have the stuff to change out my tires in case I have an issue just having to change one from a friend. So we roll out and dead last, and we're having a good time. It's 6 a.m. It's probably like 60 degrees or something like that, 65 degrees, really nice. And we start going, and then about 25 miles in, my left knee starts giving me some trouble. So the week before, I'd had a little knee trouble, not from a particular injury, but my muscle was a little bit like I had a knot in the one side, so it's kind of off balance, kind of pulling my kneecap a bit. My wife's a massage therapist. She tried to explain it to me. I was like,
fix me.
Muscle's out of balance. Can you realign my knees and get it back together? And she did a pretty good job, and it was feeling pretty good. But then mile 25, it kind of came back. And this is where I was like, I couldn't really put a lot of downward pressure, and I couldn't really get out of the saddle. It was causing some like knee, side of the knee pains. And so that was really just focused on the pedal stroke, doing a smooth, efficient pedal stroke, didn't bother at all. And then if I needed to pull up a little hill or a little spot, just really pulling up with my left foot and then pushing down my right, and then kind of dragging across and doing a more smooth pedal stroke with the right, while then just pulling up and across the bottom. So I had this kind of hybrid pedal stroke that, when I needed to push, because I couldn't hammer down with the noon to 6 part of the pedal stroke on my left knee. And that was kind of where I was like, man, I'm going to have to drop. Like, my knee's giving me problem at mile 25. How am I going to make it another 80 miles? Like, we roll in, and because of that, I wasn't able to put a lot of push into it. I was averaging about 13 and a half, which again was back of the pack. Because this was, while it was still gravel, it was pretty flat. And, a lot of my friends were holding 16, 17, so I was hanging out in the back of the pack. Nicole and she was having some knee issues and some other stuff, and then her tires started going in. So she was like, I'm dropping at the checkpoint. So rolling to the checkpoint around 10:30, but I had already prepped, like I had a foam roller. Nicole had set up a massager. So I had worked on my knee, massaged it out, took some ibuprofen. And then I was like, what, feels pretty good. And I was like, all right, let's do that. I can make it another 50 miles. What's another 50 miles? Like that's nothing, And so and then at this point, we knew the forecast was supposed to get to about 90 mid-state. So we knew that it was going to get hot this next section. But this next section, I was feeling really good. I passed about 6 people. I was holding really good. We started to hit some hills, still no sand yet, but the hills, they weren't too bad. Again, the area I'm in Akron, Ohio, is very hilly. And then the
Yeah.
gravel events where I would do, I mean, the hills would be like mile long hill, 14%. So these were like, 3 to 6%, which again, were, give you a workout, especially when your knee was giving you a little trouble. But at that point, the ibuprofen was doing great. I was eating every 20 minutes, sipping. I had 2 liters on a hydration pack in the back, 3 25-ounce water bottles with electrolyte solution. And, and then we're going and doing really good. And then about mile 90, I run out of water. I am like, it was 90 or 95, about 5 miles from the checkpoint. So somewhere at that point, because it was just the sun was baking. I was, again, 2 liters, and then I went through 3 water bottles, and I was like, wow.
Whoa.
Yeah. And, and at one point I literally popped an electrolyte tablet in my mouth because I'm like squirting the last of the water in there. Be like, I got to get some extra as I was out of my electrolyte stuff. And, and then, knees started hurting again. And I, it's about 2 miles. I put a foot down and I was kind of dizzy, starting to have some heat exhaustion. And I was like, because again, it was 90 degrees, full sun, no shade, really
Oh,
dusty.
wow.
Just, again, I was feeling really good for, till about mile 90, 95. And then it was like, all right, I gotta tap out. This is too much. I roll into the checkpoint. I see the tent, we have our van off the side. I was like, well, the tent has some water. I'm going to just chug some water. So I go in, chug a bunch of water, and then head back to the van. Again, we do the knee stretching routine, and, use the foam roller, work on that, get that feeling good, sit down. I take about a half hour at the first 2 stops each, where, it was just like, cause it was like either this or it can't go on, so
Uh-huh.
I eat food. They Nicole and Josh charged all my stuff, refilled all my water bottles, put all the electrolytes in, just did a quick, once over on the bike. Like I was just sitting there relaxing in the shade, eating a bunch of food,
Oh, that's
and
so nice.
yeah, it was amazing. Like I said, that I'd never felt so bad coming off the bike. Like it was the worst I'd ever felt on the bike. And like I said, I
Oh,
put so many thousands of miles and it was just the absolute worst. So I was like, I clearly cannot continue on, but they were like, no, you got this. Like, how's your knee? And I was like, well, I was actually feeling pretty good. Took some more ibuprofen and got everything rolling. And,
that's why
and
it feels good.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Well,
feel it.
and then again, the stretches were really nice. They were the Instagram account Dialed Health. They had the like knee pain thing, and so I did these like series of 4 stretches. I did like 3 rounds of that, and then had the massager and just really worked on the muscles around the knee and then back and shoulder just to preemptively. I know that 200 miles on a bike's gonna wreck some muscles no
Oh,
matter how good. I had a really good bike fit that was done about a month 2 months before. So like my bike set was dialed up. That was really good. Everything, the bike was working flawlessly. And then I take off probably about 3:00 from the second checkpoint, which is about mile 103. And then it's an interesting thing because then there's not another checkpoint until mile 169 where you can meet with the van, because it's basically self-supported in between the checkpoints. So the
yeah.
only reason you can call them is to drop. They can't help you in. Now there was a church at mile 143 where it was kind of what they call neutral water stop, where you can't meet your van, but there's water there and you can kind of relax. So we're like, all right, here we go. And then we hit into the Highland Hills, where this is where we start to hit some sand, and this is where I start really gaining some speed and catching a bunch of people. And then I catch
Was it
one
as
of the
bad as they said? Like the sand, is it like what kind of sand do you think? Is it like just sandy roads or is it like sand pits or
Well,
what are you
so
rolling
at
through?
this point, it's a little like bits of sand roads before these hills. So in the Highland Hills, mid-state, you're on these like gravel unpaved roads, and then they're relatively hard with a little bit of loose on the top. But then you'd hit the sand, and then you'd go up these hills, and then you'd start to hit these little bits of sand in little areas.
Right.
Now the sand really picks up once you hit the national forest, the Manistee National Forest, and then you get these 2 tracks that are deep pits of sand, and we're talking like 20
Okay.
miles of. And apparently this year, because it had been drought, there hadn't been like rain for like a month, that it was twice as loose as that it usually is. Usually there's a lot
Right.
of parts where
Okay.
people were walking Now, luckily, because I was on these big tires, I rode everything. I crushed through it. So while I was, hurting the first half, my knee was really starting to feel good. I wasn't even feeling my knee anymore. I could sprint out. So as we're getting to the hills, I'm out of the saddle, getting
Mm-hmm.
these, still regulating. We start to hit a little bit of shade, so we're not in the sun as much. It started to be about, sun also starts dipping a little bit. We start hitting 5 o'clock, and we start going up these hills, and this is where I catch my buddy Tony. He was having a rough time. He'd had some heat exhaustion. I did have a couple issues with leg cramping kind of in the section, because it was just so hot. Again, I was drinking everything and had two
Right.
leg cramps, one at mile 69 and one at mile 95. And then there's one more at mile 110 and I think this had to do with how I was compensating, is that my right leg cramped so I couldn't extend it. My left leg cramped so I couldn't contract it. And I just fell off the bike. And I get to this intersection, and then there's this kind of busy intersection. I look at the other side, and there's a tree, and there's my buddy Tony, who's resting under the tree, and we're both in kind of like hurting shape, but like we kind of pep each other up. We go and we ride off into the hills, and that's where we start hitting the first real elevation. Again, it wasn't bad compared to some of the gravel events that we'd done,
Mm-hmm.
so 6-7%, again, difficult, but totally doable. And then I roll into the church, mile 143, around, I think it was about 7 p.m. At that point, I'd never been so happy to see a church. And then and the other thing is, like, this route is like, I think it's like 95% unpaved roads. There's all sorts of fire roads and gravel, but anytime you saw pavement, it was just like a blessing. You're like, oh, this is so cool. A little bit of pavement. Oh, now I can really catch some speed and really just don't have to work as hard. And then you see the church, we get filled with water. And then my buddy Tony catches back up. We kind of regroup, and we're talking like, oh, only 26 miles to the next checkpoint. Little do we know, this was going to be the hardest 26 miles of the entire race as we go through Big M, the Manistee National Forest. Because it was brutal, because it's also pretty remote. So they're like, you don't really have cell phone reception, and like you're just going through these double track fire roads. And the way it worked is that, it looked like, two tire tracks with some grass in the middle, but they were just total sand. And it was like, and it would be like, it would be like, just, and it just went on for miles once we hit in, because earlier you'd hit a sand pit, and then you'd have a little bit of, hard pack, and then some sand. And then it was just like, you could just see the walking prints. There were just people who were walking for like
Oh my
miles.
God. That's
And
like a hike-a-bike. That's like our mud, but like
yeah,
that there's sand. Like this is part of it,
yeah,
right? And you just like, oh my God, how long is this gonna last?
yeah. I nicknamed it the Pit of Despair, because it just kept going on. Because you're just
Yeah.
like, oh, this can't be that. There can't, because the way they were talking about it was like, oh, there'd be bits of it and there'd be a lot of it, but it's doable. And then, but again, apparently it was just due to the dry conditions that everything was just so sandy, and you'd be going, and it was so beautiful, but you were just focusing on
Yeah.
heading through, because it really took a lot of technique, because I was, running a drop bar gravel bike, and I'd get in the drops and kind of lock out my arms, or
Yeah.
else you'd wash out your front wheel. But then you were kind of like sliding and almost skiing on it, because you'd be hit the sand and go really loose. And there'd always be one side that was like slightly higher, and you're like, all right, trying to choose the line. All right, is this the less loose? So like one side was usually more rideable. You could see where there was like, there was 249 people that started the race. So at this point, and I knew at that point I was there was a bunch of people that had dropped, but I was like, yeah, there's been at least 150 people ahead of me. I see all the looks like snakes in the sand, and so you could see kind of what looked a little bit harder. If there was a little bit of leaves, I'd go for that, because there's at least something more to grip on. And
Yeah.
I was able to ride all of it except for like 2 hills, which I just didn't even try, because I'm like, I could try to go up it, but I'm just going to burn all my energy. So it's just easier to, it was like a just really big, like 180, like almost 20% looking hill. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna walk this. But everything else I was able to ride. The other thing that was difficult is, there was about 6,500 feet of climbing, but because you start at sea level 0 and you go up and then you come back down, in theory, like, man, we're 155 miles in, we got to be starting to come back down. You are, but there's sandy descents, so you still have to pedal the descent, so you don't really get the coast, and they're really technical because they're loose, and if you going too fast, and it was just, there was a lot of work locking that. It was really tough on the traps, because I was trying to keep loose, but then, something, you hit a rut or a tree root come through, and then you're just kind of battling out. And I was able to, again, to kind of slide and wiggle my way through on the bike. But that's just, and again, most people were walking it, but for me, the tire setup just worked really well. I also had a, all carbon bike. It was really light, so it was easy to kind of throw the bike around and work really well. When my buddy Tony, he had a heavier steel bike, and he wasn't able to. He also had like full slicks. He was wearing really wide tires, but just couldn't get any traction, and was having a tough time in the pit of despair. Just like he's like, we were with each other for a minute. He's like, why? When does it end? Like what? And then
you're like, just don't
down
think about it.
we're going 6 or 8 miles an hour, and we're like, man, this is like, we're gonna not make cutoff, because at this point, we're hitting 8 p.m. about 10 miles from the last checkpoint, and you have to leave the last checkpoint at I think it was at 11, or it was 10:55. And then it's going like, oh, I'll be fine. And then as you're going 6 miles an hour, you're like, oh wow,
oh, wait,
26 miles is going to take us 3 hours to get through, through it, and so eventually I get a little bit ahead of my friend Tony, because he's just walking all of it and cursing and having a tough time. I was giving him some, they're like, you got this, just push through and we'll roll. And then, but at one point I was waiting for him at the top of the hills, and I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go. I told the sweeper, like, hey, there's a person behind me, make sure it gets out. And, and then there's a little bit of road as we head into Big M, and I roll in at 10:30. At this point I have to leave by 10:55. I'd been taking about a half hour, but at this point I was feeling really, really good as far as like legs and knee. But as you can see, that's one of the picture I took at that one. It was just, my face is like just totally lost. And at that point, I was on full lights, like it was pitch black, and we're in the national forest. There's no lights, it's tree cover, it's just dark. And at that point, there's just all the bugs like rolling in. Again, they weren't attacking, but it's like I have a headlight and then the light, so it's just like covered in bugs, and like it's like breathing in bugs. And I was like, well, luckily I have the electrolyte solution to make it not taste so bad.
Oh my gosh!
But I roll that electrolyte bike just plastered in bugs, and again, my support crew, Nicole and Josh, just get my bike going, give me a last little charge on all my lights, all the stuff. And I spend about 15 minutes, and and at that point, because I was like, oh, I have to drop, I'm not gonna make it. They're like, you got this, you
got to do it
here, you're good. They're like, and I was like, how's your knee? I was like, my knee feels actually great. And I was like, everything else hurts now, but I was like, at that point, feet and shoulders and back and everything, and just but I was like amped up. I was like, all right, let's go. And then I get a phone call, from one of the other guys who was the fastest group. He finished before sunset. He finished at 8:50 or something like that. But yeah, so it was wild. He was averaging like 15.6 miles an hour and just absolutely crushed it. And I was like, Micah, talk to me. What's ahead of me? He's like, well, you start there's some single track, and it's old school single track where it's sandy and ruts and quick ups and downs. And he's like, really watch your brakes. Don't go too fast on the descents, because you'll wash out, and it's really rough. And I was like, is there more sand? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, is it worse, better? He's like, it's about the same. And I'm like, how much? He's like, about 15 miles. And I'm like, bring it, let's do it. So it's like, all right, so I launch into this, and there's a few other people who are starting in, and again, got the big tire, so I'm just passing everyone as either walking, and I come up to a group that's kind of stopped at the top, walking this sandier section, and I just like power slide in, and I'm like, party time, and then bomb down a hill. And again, it's like 11:30 at night, and we still got 30 miles ahead of us. And then we go, and then finally I get about to mile 180 where the sand resides, but I knew there was a big hill. This was kind of the biggest climb. You just look at the profile, and there's like one last big, straight up, and so I had some music queued up for it, had some Dio Rainbow in the Dark, and I was like, all right, I'm in this headspace, and we're going up this hill. I make it up that hill, and then at this point we start passing a few other people, and everyone's kind of fist bumping as we're like, yeah, we got this, and so there was a group of fast guys, and they were hold like 20 miles an hour, but then they'd like stop and eat. So we were kind of doing this thing where they'd go ahead, then I'd catch them as they're off their bikes, and then they go back ahead, and then they eventually finished pretty well ahead of me. But I roll in that last kind of 15 miles was relatively flat, but it's pitch dark, and it's like you're kind of in farmland. You'll see like they're like red lights blinking, and you think, oh, those might be other cyclists, but you're like, no, that's the silos and stuff. And you're just kind of going and don't know. And then I meet another cyclist who was like, at this point, whose GPS died, was just using cue sheets and was like, hey, when's the next turn? And I was like, wow, that's got to take some thing. And I help him out. We get him a turn. But then at that point, he was walking all the hills. So at that point, I continue on because I'm just slow and steady, not getting off the bike, just going. And just he heading through it, as everything really starts to hurt. But I'm like, all right, we're only 10 miles out. Oh, we're only 5 miles out. Then 4 miles out, I see the
lights of the
race
city
organizers come through. They're like, you got this. What's your number? I'm like 266. So I'm like, okay, just a few more miles. And then I roll in, and at that point, we hit some pavement going into town. I'm back up to about 20 miles an hour, and I'm just hammering as if I'm going to miss the cutoff, but I was going. And then we go through the finish line at 1:54 a.m. So that's 19 hours and 54 minutes to complete it. And then, my support crew and everyone's there to congratulate me. We dipped the tire in Lake Michigan. I talked to John, who had completed just before midnight, and then again Mike had finished about 8:50 or 8:30, somewhere in that ballpark before sunset. Now Tony behind me, he had to bail at mile 171 because his light died and he didn't have his backup on him, and he was in the middle of like pitch black national forest, low cell phone reception. He was like 5% battery on his phone, his light's dead, and he calls it. And so he's gonna have to go back and get revenge. And I was like, all right, I'll go back with you.
We can do this together.
Finish line again. So, but and then we roll back to Airbnb, which was amazing to get a shower, have a beer and eat some food, and then kind of pass out and on some really comfortable beds and in Ludington. So that was basically the race.
So how many people ended up finishing officially?
192, which is about 77%.
Oh, that's a good number.
Yeah, it was good. I know. Well, the previous year was even hotter, and I think there were around like 66 or 67% that finished. And then the year before that was the rain year, and only like 45 or something like that. So on an average year, it was about 85%, but they haven't had an average year in 4 years.
Right.
So, but it was still good.
That's still good numbers.
Yeah, and I was 189 out of 192 that finished. So there was 3 people that finished behind me, but I got it.
That doesn't matter.
But I was like, I made it, especially considering I was ready to give up at each checkpoint and be like, I can't do this, with the and then the fact that we just go through and support crew amped it up. I was able to get my knee in working order, and it's fine. Everything's all good. But yeah, so it was definitely the hardest thing I'd ever done. I felt all the range of emotions, and especially the at the end, like where you're just like, oh, I'm finished. I don't even know what to do with myself right now.
I know, seriously, like I don't have any feelings towards this right now.
I'm not sure how I feel. I am.
So that's awesome. Well, it's super cool to have I guess a crew to help you out, and also a crew to ride with. Now, I know that there are other events. How many were in there? Because they have like 100-miler. That's just like a loop around
that was
the
finish.
finish.
Yeah, I know that the finish percent was around like 90% for that, but I don't remember how many more people. It was probably around 100 or something, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, you're the only crazies who do the 200. But that's what we are. We are crazy. Yeah. So now I guess you're back on your bike, I'm assuming. Yeah. Yep. Took you a bit, a week, a week.
Took me a bit. Yeah, took a week off, and one of the main thing was just doing all the maintenance to everything.
I know.
And, getting
cleaning the bike.
Well, and I'd been training, and so I'd had a lot of stuff. I'd been really busy with work and all these things and being a dad. And so I was like, and I had this week off from work. So I was like, all right, this is the week where I'm going to take everything, get all the bikes tuned up. I've owned lots. I have 14 bicycles, so it's like everything was due for a full tune up. I got the road bike done, the gravel bike, the touring bike, my BMX bike's all ready to roll, and everything is,
But you could do, I'll just send my bikes down to you. I still haven't like cleaned 100% my bike. Like there's still mud from Kansas on it, and it sounds horrible. So I have to like take the drivetrain apart kind of thing. Because I don't know. It's
it's a
dirty.
big thing. It took a long time. Really just cleaning everything, getting the
Yeah.
drivetrain out, resetting the chain. Like I was
Yeah.
surprised, like the chain, because
That's the
again, it
only thing
wasn't
I
wet.
cleaned.
So yeah, it was pretty good. Like the wax chain was a game changer. You
Yeah.
wouldn't know that I just put that much abuse into it, because like my legs were covered in sand. I mean, everything, the bike's covered in sand. It was just which is not good on a drivetrain. But I did the chain checker after I reset and re-waxed the chain, and it feels pretty good, because I thought, oh, maybe I'll have to trash this chain, and I was like,
Yeah.
keep riding it. It's not gritty. The wax just really shed all the stuff and kept it really good. It was nice and quiet even through the end. you know
Yeah. Was there a lot of mechanicals like
um
on from due to the sand or anything? Like anything
some
out
people,
of the
nothing
ordinary?
super crazy. I mean, we hear people having flats and stuff, but
Yeah.
because it wasn't wet, the
Yeah.
brakes weren't an issue, because that was like the year that rained. People's brake pads were just grinding down just from the slurry, because the sand would just create the slurry, even if you're not using the pads, because they're not that much space. And
Right.
so, but this year, again, aside from a few flat tires, I know, I've had a friend that broke his rear wheel, but was able to get a rear wheel, and someone gave him a rear wheel and he finished. It was just like a wild thing. I had one friend who last minute, it was kind of a guy, Jonah, who rides. He last minute decided to do it, and he drove to Ludington and then took the shuttle to the starting line, and then spent the night at the church, and then did the race. He finished 6 minutes before I did, so he just
Oh, cool.
just before me. And then he took a nap in his car and drove 6.5 hours back to Akron, and did the group ride at the bike shop at 10 a.m. the next morning, which again, he finished at 2 a.m. So we're because we saw photos online, and we're just like,
No
man.
way. Really?
Yeah, I was just like, that's I was like,
Does he
that's some
operate
next
on a
level.
different level or what?
Apparently, Jonah's awesome. I ride with him sometimes. Yeah, he was just like, yeah, I took a little nap and then drove home, and then went to the group ride at 10 a.m.
And then after, is that when he kind of like
Yeah, he'd have to crash at some point. There was
oh my God, that would
definitely,
not be me for
yeah.
sure.
I was like, I'm fine with taking a week off.
Yeah. Yeah. So now that you're back, what is I know everybody's like, so what's up next? I don't know if you had any plans. I know I didn't, but do you have any did you is there anything in the schedule for the rest of the summer, or is it more
There's two more
just
rides
riding?
that I'm going to do. There's this Magnolia in September, which is a
Oh,
gravel
okay.
event that friends had done. That one has a lot of the gravel events in the Ohio area are very heavy in the climbing, really
Right.
loose gravel, really kind of epically hard climbs, like
Mm-hmm.
way more than Michigan was ever. Michigan was hard because it's long. These are, be like, 64 miles, but 7,000 feet of climbing,
Oh,
and so and then there's a ride on Jeremy's ride, which is in October, which was the first gravel event I did last year. It was like my first thing to see how this goes, and I did the 64, and that one kind of set me like, that's where I was like, I need to train. I was having leg cramping. I finished last. I finished and I had a good time, but I was like, wow, this is a different beast from the touring that I'd done before. And so
uh-huh.
now that I finished like 5 hours, now I was like, all right, I'm going to do that after training and doing this whole season. So I did Black Fork to start out in May, and then we did the main ride here. So my goal is to have 4 events in for this season, and
Yeah,
and then get back into training
I
indoors.
know. Right. So same with me. I think I'm doing a September, October thing, but I'm not sure what. Like just now, it's just like I've got tons of stuff at home to do, and the kids are getting into camps, and we want to do family stuff. So I'm like, no, I'm okay. I don't need to race.
Yeah.
I just need to continue maintaining, right? Because like, I mean, I don't want to lose the fitness that I gained doing that, and I feel like I kind of did, but whatever.
Yeah, we'll
And
have a little
then
bit of break and then get back to riding, and that's why I'm excited this week. I'll get some riding in. I also get to spend some time on the BMX bike, which I specifically wasn't working in because I was like, I knew I'm gonna like hurt myself, and because like we just got some new pump tracks built in the area, which I was really excited. I love going pump tracks, and so that was my favorite thing. I built up a BMX bike for that, so that's on the agenda
is
for
that you're
this
gonna
week.
bring your son to that? He's
He's
got a little
still
strider.
he likes he's got his little strider, so he'll be on the little strider section, so he loves that. And I got a Burley trailer, I pull him around, and he loves going for bike rides.
Nice.
So he's 3, and he's on the cusp. He loves going on his. He likes the trailer more than riding on doing that because he's like, "Is Papa, you do the work?" And I was like,
Yeah, yeah,
"All
you
right."
do the work. Okay. I don't know. We're gonna take a
But
little break.
but he loves it. We'll go do 40 miles on a Saturday. We'll go out and go to. He loves guacamole and tacos, so we go to a place that's about 20 miles east of here. Go get some tacos, and then
Oh,
ride
nice.
back, and then he loves it. So
I know he
he
just
loves
gets to
doing
sit
that.
back and read the book. You know, those
Yep.
kids who like got their books in there and their toys and stuff.
Well,
So,
and he loves listening to music, so I always bring a speaker. So he's always requesting all the stuff for me to play.
oh,
So
that is so
he does.
funny. That's cool. So, okay, I have one last question. So, I don't know if you're thinking this far ahead, but for next year,
Hmm.
because he was like, because I'm starting to think about next year,
Yeah.
because I don't know about you, but I've got to go back to Unbound and finish off what I left. And I totally was on course. I'm like, I don't want to have to come back here. I have to finish this. Like, this is it. Like, and uh, I don't even know what happened. I can't speculate enough. But are you already thinking about the things like when you finish this, did you kind of make a list of things that you would do better? Like like because
Totally.
I have a list of things like off man, like I'm gonna do this, like I need to do this, this, and this, like for sure next time because I didn't do it. And also the training. Like, do you think you would mix up your training from what you did last year? Because I'm kind of thinking about,
Honestly, no. I mean, I like I said, the fitness of my legs and everything. Like I said, only the knee was just a separate thing. The main thing I would just make sure is I would just get more massages leading up to it.
yeah.
And again, I have my wife and her twin sister are massage therapists, so I should have been a little more. I got one massage, but it wasn't fully worked out.
You're like,
So
hmm,
that was the biggest thing that I would change is I would just be like just schedule the time and just get more massages, make sure everything is all
like your
set up.
flexibility kind of thing.
um yeah, and then
Yeah.
but as far as that, the other thing was a little changing up a little bit of strategy, like, and this is like a tough balance because like the first 50 miles are really flat, and that's really where you can make up some time, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where I would really push a little bit harder. Again, you still don't want to push too hard, but
Yeah.
I would feel like like I said, my friends, like they were holding about 16 miles an hour through that section, and when I look at our training rides, we were doing about the same amount of miles per week, averaging about the same amount of miles, and he
Mm-hmm.
finished about midnight. So I know that I could gain a little bit of ground in those sections. And then, if my knee's in better shape, I'd be able to take a little less time at the checkpoints and just kind of refuel, get back onto it, do my few stretches, and really uh, get back on it and go again. But I wouldn't change anything on the bike setup. I mean, it was really, really good. The only thing I would change is in that second area, and I was doing that for the next out for the between checkpoints 2 and 3 was I added a fourth water bottle that I carried in my jersey pocket with electrolytes.
Right.
So having the 2 liters on the back and then 4 water bottles, which again, I didn't think that in 50 miles I would go through all of that, but I did when it
Yeah.
was really hot. So that was the biggest thing, was just having a little more fluid, or again doing it faster, but so
You're
I'm
like-
just doing it a
That's
little
always
bit quicker.
hindsight, right? You're like,
Yeah.
I need to be faster. You're like, oh.
But specifically on that first section, because you kind of have to, and again, it's that balance. But I also know, like, I can still hold it pretty good. The second section is a tougher section, but really that first section, if I were able to get a little bit more, and again, being able to be with and there was a lot of people doing some pace lines and some drafting and really
Oh,
getting that down, because I was in the back of the pack. There wasn't any of that, but
yeah.
the other three people who was riding with, they were in there and they were holding really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, if I could be in those and gain a little bit of time in that first half of the race before the sand goes, because again, I was doing really good. I made up a good time between checkpoints 3 and the last, but the sand is just going to be slow.
Right.
I felt like I was still faster riding it and didn't take too much energy, because not only were my tires, my tire pressure was dialed in really good, which is, it's also silly when you're running that big of a tire. I was running 21 pounds in the front and 22 in the rear, and
Oh,
that was
wow.
perfect. And I had a little bit more for the first half of the race, and then I think I was at like 22 for the front and 23 for the first half, and then I dropped about a pound or two out of each going into the sandy sections, and that was magnificent. It just worked really
Wow.
well, and there are some other tires that aren't as wide that my coworker or friend Micah, who rode with it, he had Schwalbe G1Rs
Those
in
are the ones I
45s.
had.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he rolled perfectly through the sand. I think that the way that those kind of almost act like paddles, like, worked really good, even though they
Hmm.
weren't that wide. Well,
Were they
some people
40s?
running like 38s or something like that, but all of my crew, like in the Akron area, we all love big tire stuff. So like we're running like 50s and 2.0s, and so it's like to run with the racers who are all trying to go a little narrower, and so we're like 45 is narrow to us.
Oh
So,
my God.
but
Oh
the
God.
Schwalbe, the tire that you run was absolutely amazing for that. So if you do ever do the
Yeah.
Michigan Coast to Coast, that tire is what I'd recommend. So
Yeah. 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 I kind of think of a training, like I've got my list of things I would do that I didn't do. And because I'm like, I gotta sit down, write this right away before I forget. But like for the training, I think I just keep to what we were doing. And because it's always like, oh yeah, we need to do more. Yeah, but we just don't have time to fit that all in. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
mean, I was still riding 6 to 7 hours a week, and that's how I felt like when
yeah.
I took a bunch of days off work. I didn't work a full week in June, because every week I just took a day off to just ride, and
Oh, nice.
and that was, which I would again do again, because it was just
Uh-huh.
nice to be like, okay, cool. Every week I'm getting in the longer ride, and then I'm commuting to and from work, so I'm just getting
Mm-hmm.
time on the saddle, and
Yeah.
I was very familiar with that saddle. It was a physique pave or pav or something like that I've had for like 10 or 12 years, maybe even longer. I think it got in 2010, but it just works really well. And I had on the fit, and it just like, yeah, that part was fine, because everyone's like, oh, how was your butt? I was like, everything else hurt, like that was all dialed in. That was
Oh,
fine. I mean, it
God,
was
lucky you.
yeah, it was, no, we didn't have any wetness and rain, though. I did
Yeah.
bring a change of bibs and jerseys for every checkpoint in case it rained, so
Oh,
like, because that was the thing, as I knew that, like, after we talked, I was like, getting it dry down there is the only way to keep it from getting real bad. And
yeah.
luckily I was able to keep everything really good, and didn't have any issues with that or the bike. It was just the knee and the heat, but we rolled through it, and we finished, and then we're just like, all right. And at that point I was like, I know everyone was like not wanting to go, but I'm like, Tony, so when are you going back? Next year, 2 years? He's like, oh, I don't want to think about it. And then eventually it's like, all right, we're going to do it.
Are you
So
gonna do it again next year?
I don't know if it's next year, it's in 1 or 2 years. I'm definitely going to do some more gravel events. If I don't do that, there's this gravel event called Funk Bottom that
Oh.
is the week before that a lot of my friends do. And it's absolute just mayhem of climbing. And so if that's my focus, I'm definitely going to work even more out of the saddle and more climbing, because it's literally
Right.
like 8,500 feet of climbing in 60 miles, like just Oh yeah, just
Whoa.
yeah. It prides itself on being the most brutal one in the Ohio gravel grinder series or whatever. And
Holy.
yeah, so it's, but again, it's like, what do you do? It's like, well, let's go. But everyone, I have a lot of friends that they go every year, like, oh, you gotta do funk. And I'm like, if I'm not doing coast to coast next year, I'll do funk. And I'll be yelling at you for
Yeah.
suggesting I do it, but we'll finish it and then I'll be having some beers.
Yeah, and then you can add another one because it's, just to because it's not as long.
Yeah,
You do
exactly.
two
Right.
instead of one.
The other thing is Micah, who he had did a mountain bike race the week after. So there's this past weekend that was a relay called the Reign of Pain in Tuscaloosa, and it was basically there's like you do, it was a 2-person relay team where one person would do a lap and the other person would do a lap, and you did it for, I think it was like
8 hours?
6 hours or 8 hours or something. It was, yeah, it was 8 hours. Yeah, it was 8 hours. And so I think they each got in like 2 or 3 laps. And yeah, it was a wild
I do
ride.
something like that. That is fun. It's called Hurtin' and Halliburton.
Okay,
So
yeah.
it's like an 8 hour, it's a 27K loop. And you just do it as many times as you can. So you can do it in teams or you can do it solo. I've done it 2 years solo. I think I'm gonna do it as a team with my husband. I'm trying to convince him to do it. I'm like,
I love all these different events, and I know there's a couple other people in the crew had were like, oh, I found this event and stuff. So I'll be up to something definitely. So I know I'll be training hard for next year, and my thing is probably just focus on even more climbing stuff, because the Michigan level of climbing, I was totally fine. Like I didn't feel bad on any of the hills. Like all of that was good. I was able to, you know, get out of the saddle really efficiently. And then when I was in the sand, I was out of the saddle the whole time. So all of that
oh wow.
training, because it's like, I was, kind of, locking out in the drops, getting in the
Mm-hmm.
position, getting a good point and skiing the bike over the
Yeah, yeah,
sand.
yeah.
But,
No kidding.
so being
Uh-huh.
off the set, but it was like, like just a really section of just,
Especially going down.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
just yeah.
So it was
Mm-hmm.
invaluable, but again, I can always be even better at it and just keep on getting stronger and building up speed. Just getting faster. Because again, I was never into racing thing, and now I'm just like, oh, trying to finish. But as I get better, and I was like, all right, well, I can do this, and I have the whatever it is that in you that was like, oh yeah, I did rode 19 hours and 54 minutes. Let's go ride again. So it's like, all right, how do we keep refining that and keep working on it? So
Yeah. Yeah, I know. That's well those it's funny because I was just thinking like I don't know if as I don't know if I could do something shorter. It's a weird feeling because I feel that I don't know, maybe it's just Unbound that the shorter one is way more competitive
yeah,
because there's like 10 times more people and I'm like, you know, I don't really want to feel competitive and stuff like that. So you do the longer one, there's like way less crazy people doing it. So you have like all this pressure's taken off you. And I'm like, okay. Now I just got to watch time so that I don't and I didn't watch my time much. So I can make it to the finish, you know.
it's a whole different, and that was what was really nice about the Michigan ride. Everyone had a really good sense of camaraderie. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, there was the pointy end of the spear that finishes in like 10 hours. Like
Yeah.
who knows about them, but everyone else I ran into was great. Everyone, fist bumps and just, we got this, and it was
Yeah.
really great as the checkpoints, as we walked up like zombies and
Yeah.
refueled, and especially at that church checkpoint. And I did a live update and I rewatched it. I was like, man, I totally out of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Like
you're like
at the time I
I'm
feel like, yeah, I feel good, I got this. And then I'm just like, I'm at the church at mile 143. I've
I know
got
I'm like,
some
"Oh,
miles to go.
no, look at him. But like I look like that too in the morning after like biking for 12 hours. It's like, what? I need a little napper now.
Yeah, it was so on the saddle time I had 17 hours and 30 minutes, and
Oh,
total finish
okay.
time was 19 hours and 54 minutes. So,
Ah, so you can shorten those transitions for
yeah,
sure.
exactly. So that's
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 where
kind of
you
my
lose
focus, is
time.
really just
Uh-huh.
dialing in the checkpoints and
Yeah.
the support crew. And now that they've done it before, I mean, there might be a different crew, but there'll definitely be people who've either done the ride, doing support for us, or my buddy Josh, I probably can rope him into doing it again. He likes a good weekend adventure. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so it was an amazing experience. I end up so my average mile per hour for the whole section was a 11.7. So like all things considered, I was like, you know what, I'll take it. That
Yeah.
gives me a baseline, and
Yeah,
to go from
exactly.
there. And then like the range in our group, was like 15.6. So it's like, all right, we got some work. We can work on getting that
Mm-hmm.
down, and it'd be nice to. My eventual goal would be to finish before the sunset at 9:30.
Yeah.
Sometime. Now that's shaving off a lot of hours. It's like 4 hours or something like that. But like I said, I could shave at least an hour and a half off the stops, if not more, depending,
Yeah.
as long as things are going good. Again, but that's the other thing about these endurance events. You can't control the weather. Who
I
knows?
know.
Maybe pouring, and you maybe have a mechanical. So you can have all these plans, but just know that, like, all right, well, you got the fortitude to finish it. And at least now I know each section, so I can really strategize. Like, all right, push here. I know that this goes on, so I'll let off a little bit here, and then
Yeah.
knowing that the sand does eventually end. So
Yeah. Sand does eventually end. And that's the thing, like it's like, oh my God, okay, I gotta go back, but what if something else happens and I don't get to finish it again? And I'm like, oh, it's hard to think about that because it's so long, right? Like I was lucky I didn't have any mechanicals, like compared to people who are just dropping out left and right because of their bikes. And I'm just like, whoa. I have to finish, regardless.
gotta work on it.
It's such a weird mind game, not mind game, just like the whole going on in there. But
Yeah, you did. And the thing with that is, like, you just got to focus on the things you can control and minimize those
yeah,
variables as much. You're like, all right, make sure a bike's been worked on with a mechanic, got
yeah,
spare parts that if you do need to change out something
yes,
like
that's
that, like,
true. That's
I
true.
brought a whole separate wax chain. So if things were really bad or something happens, like I could,
Yeah,
just throw in a new chain,
yeah,
knowing that sand, and if it, because it was supposed to rain like the day after, and like the forecast kept changing. So I'm just like, it thunderstormed the day after. If we would have done it one day later, it would have been a totally different race, going
right.
through that. So just, knowing that, like, okay, we've got all the plan for as much as we can control. And then
That's
beyond
right.
that,
Like, okay, what's it gonna be like outside today? What
yeah,
are we
I
gonna
rode
get?
with a guy for a section,
Mm.
Christopher. He tried it in the year that it rained, and he bailed, I think, after the first checkpoint, and then he got to mile 143 and then bailed at the church this time. So he's going, so so it was like he had a tough go at it, and but he's like, all right, we got it. And so I was like, come on, let me know what year. I'll come back with all y'all. Let's do it. You guys are gonna finish. We're gonna get through it. And I was like, just really, I don't know, everyone's got a really good attitude, even those who didn't finish, again, even though it was difficult. But it was,
Hmm.
again, just figuring out, all right, how can you make your body do this for this long? How can you make your mind stay in the game? Little stuff, especially at night when you're going through and there's like all sorts of little critters going on. There's an owl hooting at you. You start giving them names. You're like, come on, Jack, leave me, let me be for a minute. Celebrating
Exactly.
every time we had the pavement. I had a little song I sang every time pavement came, because it just got me a little reprieve from the gravel and vibration. I was like, all right,
Oh God, really?
celebration. And then lots
Hmm.
of good little snacks, little fruit balls I had, and a couple little things, crackers that I would were my little treats, a little bit of
Oh yeah, I need
butter
more
and honey,
treats
so
and
yeah.
McDonald's. That's
we
what you
had
said.
Detroit pizza on the way back. That was my whole thing. I was like, all right, we get an excuse to stop in Detroit for my favorite style pizza, the square, caramelized butter crust corners, amazing.
Oh
Got
my
the
God.
Buddy's pizza. It was absolutely worth it. Best. It was just like, the next day after, you're just like, I'm so hungry, I can't eat enough.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God. Well, that's super awesome, Carl. I'm so excited to have gotten you on the podcast to share your experience at Coast to Coast. So, where can people follow you? Where are you?
Instagram is just a EQD Carl on Instagram, and then I'm on Facebook just under my name, Karl Vorndran, and that's really it. I don't really do Twitter, but
All right, cool. Well, thanks a lot again. And if anybody's looking to do coast to coast, you know who to reach out to for some tips and tricks to get you across. If anybody's doing Unbound, you can reach out to me. Excel. I can't talk about the early one. I did enough mud to talk about the mud, but and you can always reach out and follow the podcast on YouTube as well as Instagram. So thanks so much, everyone. Have an amazing day. And thanks a lot, Karl, for sharing this. I can't wait to get this up on the podcast.
thanks for having me. It was great.
Awesome. Aw- Thanks. I
Yeah.
can't stop it. I don't know why. Recording, stop. Yeah, disabled. Anyways, doesn't matter. But well, thanks for jumping on your day off. So I guess you guys got some plans for tomorrow.
Just doing some grilling out and seeing some
Oh, some
fireworks,
grilling. Yeah.
and then still got some house projects around, like I'm working on uh fixing up a area where we had some bushes removed, and then I got some deck stuff, and then cleaning the garage and getting
Oh God.
all the stuff that I put off while I was just riding my bike the whole time. And so now it's like, all right, back to this
Back
is my
to
reset week to get as much back to
yeah.
normal before we start prepping for Magnolia and getting things going.
That sounds good. Same here. Same here. Getting all my gardening done. Like I
Yeah.
did a massive amount before I left because I'm like, I've got to get this done before I leave here because like nobody's gonna do it. And
Yep.
like the vegetable garden, just like just make sure it doesn't die while I'm gone. My chickens are okay. But now it's like everything else, and yeah, and I've really got to take apart my bike because it sounds horrible. I'm like, sorry. It's like clank. It's like clanking. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, sorry, everybody. It's just haven't taken the time to fix it yet.
It's just so much, and it's like in theory, like, oh yeah, it's really easy, and you're like, no, it's just the
No,
whole
it's
thing.
like one of those like 4 hour jobs because you just got to take everything apart. Because like I've been known to lose parts, like, and it's not something like on my campy road bike. I lost this major clamp that goes in the drivetrain, like the bottom, and you can't put it together without it. And I lost in the grass. I'm like, of course. I was like, I'm gonna put it here so I don't lose it. And I was like, oh, where the
And
fuck
now it's
is
gone.
it? And it took a while to order it. So things like that, you just have to take. It has to be like a zen chunk of time.
Yeah, that's why I was like, when I sit down to do a bike, I was like, I gotta do it all. Take
Mm-hmm.
off the cassette, clean it.
Yeah.
Take the wheels off, retrue them, get everything going, and get it all waxed up and,
Yeah,
and
but I
ready to
did my
go.
chain. I cleaned that straight away, and I just put wax on it, like the drip wax, not like just from the bottle.
Yeah.
Like I haven't done the wax dip because I had to go buy a new melting pot. So I was like, because I wanted to have that just specific, so when I just put all the rest in there and just leave it, and it would harden, and then I just reuse it again. So I didn't want to use like something else I had to put on the stove and
Yeah, it's just a
if I
whole.
can plug everything together and have like the whole station set up. I was like, I'll do what Karl did.
The drip wax has worked really well. I've done that in between, and like I've been really happy with just the whole wax system in general. And
Yeah.
now it's
Well, they do say like every 500 kilometers, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So
And then,
that's
and
why I
then it's
like,
like, and then if you run in rain and muck, a little bit sooner, and then it's just
yeah.
all kind of varies. But what's nice is that, like, compared to just a drip oil, it's way easier. Just all right, you just got to know, okay, what day do it before, and then give it at least 24 hours to get a good set in. It's like 4 hours, I think, is technically the cure time, but overnight is the best.
Oh, for your chain, like the
Yeah,
wax?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So that's what
Okay.
the idea. That's one of the main reasons why some people won't do it. Are like, oh, if they just throw on some oil and go for a ride, it's easier in ways. But again, not having the mess to clean up, and then only having to do it every couple hundred miles is
Yeah, yeah.
it's been a game changer. I wasn't sure if I'd switch it all to all of my bikes, but I'm moving every single bike I have to it. So
Yeah.
that's the other thing is I'm this week going to be waxing a bunch more chains.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because I have a lot of bikes and a lot of things, and my garage is starting to become a big chaotic mess. I'd bought chains for all of my bikes and I misplaced where I put them. So I have a stack of 6 chains somewhere in my garage. I know they're there.
That's why you got to go clean it.
I got to clean the garage, and then it's like we got to wax 6 chains to get the rest of my bikes up on it. Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. I was like, I can't afford it because I also have my mountain bike with the 12-speed, like, you know, SRAM chain that was like $80 for the self, you know. And
they're
not
like, cheap.
I know. I was like, I'm not buying. I was like, I'm not riding that bike until I find that chain.
Yeah. Your wife's probably like, yeah, great idea.
Yeah.
To the garage there. All right. Well, I won't keep you any longer. Thanks so much again. And I'll probably be going up at the end of the month. But okay. You will get an email when it does so that you can share it, and please tag me and all that good stuff.
I will. Thanks again for having me. It was great.
All right. Thanks a lot, Karl. Take care.
See ya.
Bye. All right. Well, there you have it. There's Karl. And I am super stoked to have him as a friend. And it just goes to show, like, you know, a lot of my clients who joined me this past winter have gone on to do a lot of great events, whether they're races or travel. The thing that they've experienced is just better overall fitness, and being able to, one of my friends, Christine, being able to keep up with her husband. Yeah, good technique for endurance. And anyways, but I loved his story, and I don't know if I'd take sand over mud. Would you take sand over mud? I'm not sure. I think I would take mud because you could probably bike around it. I don't know. My situation to his situation sound kind of different, because I'm envisioning you know, the forests, and, you know, the more the people just ride on the roads, the more chewed up it gets and sandy it gets. Where mud, we had the option of bailing into the grass and biking up there. So anyways, but thank you so much for listening, and please do share this. And if you're interested in listening to the podcast that I had on Coast to Coast, I think it was like around 101 episode, because I did it around the same time as I did Barry-Roubaix last year. And we're just going to double check, because it's really worth listening to. And that's how Karl got interested into doing that gravel event. So it's episode 181, Coast to Coast Gravel Grind with Mark Van Tongeren. And that is the episode where I was interviewing him as an event coordinator and telling us about that event. So anyways, I was supposed to do that last year, the 100-miler, but I had to bail because I was really sick post-COVID. Crazy. I was on my way to, that morning I was supposed to drive down 12 hours to the start, and I woke up, I had a sore throat, I was dizzy, and I had to bail that Thursday morning. And it was tough because I really don't like bailing, but I really did not want to get stuck in the States sick. And it's a good thing I didn't go, because a couple drives later, my car broke down. So, like, the one that I was going to take, it absolutely died. So that was just a sign, I think. So anyways, have a great one. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube, and put those notifications on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss another episode. Have a great one. Bye. Thank you so much for spending this time with me on the Secrets from the Saddle podcast, learning more about sighting people, places, and things that make cycling such an exciting sport. I'm so glad you stopped by today. Please leave me a review if you feel so moved to do so. I would love to hear your feedback. And if you could take 1 second to share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it, I would be forever grateful. Also, if you could please leave me a review if you feel so moved by going to iTunes and leaving me an honest thought and an honest comment, telling me what you think, and most importantly, tell me what you'd like to hear more of. It would really help me to bring more great, inspiring cycling stories to you. Until then, have an amazing day. Make sure you ride your bike. And don't forget to visit my YouTube channel if you'd like to see the full version of this podcast live.